All right, hey, all you not normals, we got Walker Richardson today. We got a cool show for you. We got Walker's going to share a few insights he's picking up from a book that he's reading, and I'm excited to hear about it as well. So let's go, take it away. What are you up to?
Okay, maybe I'll preface. The two I'm reading right now is Elon Musk's biography by Walter Isaacson,
Yeah,
and the other one's called The Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene, the 48 Laws of Power guy.
okay,
In the Laws of Human Nature book, he tells the story of Shackleton,
yeah,
who's a British explorer, like prior World War One, a couple years ahead of that.
yeah,
And he's racing some other explorer to be the first one to get to the North Pole, and he loses that race. The other guy gets there first. So he decides, okay, I'm gonna be the first person to cross Antarctica.
yeah,
So he's gonna sail there and then walk across the whole thing is his goal. But on his way there, like 100 miles offshore, his ship gets stuck in a ice drift. It freezes into place and they're stuck there for the winter, and it basically becomes their winter camp. And to keep morale high, he sets up like daily routine for everybody.
uh-huh,
So they have to work through chores. He sets up games. They have large dinners and they like have certain songs and stuff because he knows that if morale dies, then they die.
right,
So he goes to huge lengths to make sure that everybody's in a good mood, but he doesn't let anyone know that he's going to these lengths because he wants them to feel like it's nothing to worry about. So like certain individuals who are weak links, he identifies. He's writing all this in his journal. He like moves them to his camp so he can keep a closer eye on them
oh,
because
interesting,
there's multiple tents, and he doesn't want them. If they're all in the same tent, then they could just breed despair. So he brings those weak guys to his tent, and then the ones that he can't bring because he's full, he kind of puts one in each tent so they don't, double up.
yeah,
And he does this all very strategically. Pressure of the ice, these huge bergs, just crushes their ship one day, like 3 months into this winter camp. And so they have to abort ship, abandon ship, and move all their supplies. They had 50 dogs, sled dogs, that they had to get off the ship and all their food. And they had 3 life rafts. Um, so 3 months in, that he says, "Okay, guys, well, the camp's over." This whole time, he'd been planning on continuing the journey as soon as they could get out of the ice. But now he's like, "Okay, now it's just our goal is to go home," which is I didn't realize that, but that was crazy. That he's still planning on continuing once they got out. So they have all their supplies, and they're traveling across this iceberg, and their hope is that they can get to this island that they know about. And I don't know why they know about it, but there's like a known island in the area. But I think a month into that journey to get to this island, 2 of their other rafts get stuck in the ice and they both break. So they're down to one raft. Because the whole time they have a camera and they're documenting all of it. It was really cool to go look at all that. So they're down to their last raft. So they shuttle people from the iceberg to Elephant Island, which is like a sparse little island that's 100 miles or 100 kilometers away from where they're currently at. I don't
mm-hmm.
know how they're navigating all this. 413 days after they had gotten stuck, they touched down on Elephant Island.
Oh, my word,
I don't understand how they're not dead yet. They're
yeah,
literally in thick snow, but they've been eating penguins and like seals
yeah,
along with their ship supplies. And they're trying to wait it out on Elephant Island, but they realize that they're not going to make it if they just wait there. So Shackleton gets a group of, I think, 6 guys. They get on their last boat, and he takes some of the weakest dudes so that they don't kill the morale while he's gone. And then they ride the ship from the island to the next island where he knows there's a whaling station,
yeah,
and he thinks it'll be manned. And so they spend, I think, 2 or 3 nights. They've gone through storms. They're all soaking wet, but they get to the island and they can't dock because it's too treacherous. So they
nice.
have to spend another night just looking at the island, but they're in a
Trying
storm.
to find a place to find a safe harbor, kind of.
Yeah, because the seas are so rough. They
Oh,
would just get smashed.
yeah,
So they're there, but they have to sleep in the storm, like they're just getting slammed by water all night. But the next morning, like it's a little better, so they get up next to the island and their boat gets like smashed, and they crawl up on the land, and they have to trek across the island, which has 5,000 feet of elevation. So they have to mountaineer now
yeah,
to get to the whaling station. So they like 3 of the guys can't go anymore. They're done. So he leaves them, and then he goes with 2 other guys, and they tie each other to like with a rope because they're gonna be going up and down these like cliffs.
Yeah.
Like, long story short, like 3 days later, after passing through the mountains, they arrive at the whaling station, and the whaling guy who should have known Shackleton didn't recognize him because he was just so tattered and beat up, like Odysseus.
Yeah. Right.
Kind of sim scenario, but like real life. And so then 3 days later, he hasn't even recovered. He's just spent over 2 years in the ice.
Yeah.
3 days later, he goes back to go rescue his men, but it's too frozen in, too locked, so he can't get there.
Oh,
So he goes back 2 more times. He still can't get to his men who are on Elephant Island. So he like enlists the help of England, who's now in World War One. They don't have the funds to help. So he goes and lobbies with Chile, who gives him a boat to go save his men. And when he gets there, every single one is still alive.
Oh, that's amazing. Wow.
In over 2 years. The lessons in how he keeps morale high.
Yeah.
Keeps the men occupied and busy, and like instills these very purposeful groups. Like, it's so genius. And he doesn't once like show them that he's concerned. Like, he just displays like confidence in their eventual return to society for over 2 years.
Oh, that's a lesson, 1,000 lessons in leadership right there.
When I was watching the videos on this one and listening, like, it was just another thing, and then another thing, and then another thing. Like, I can't, it's almost a folklore tale. Like, it just is so unreal.
Yeah, it's almost a myth, like Paul Bunyan and Big Blue, or
Yeah, except they documented it with film. They have it on video.
wow.
Yeah.
Just one thing after another, one impossible feat after another, or a challenge, after another, they overcome it.
Yeah. But one of the things I like about digging into that story is like, you can't complain about anything if somebody can live 2 years on a floating iceberg and control 20 hungry dudes in cold, freezing days. Like, if that's possible, I don't have anything to complain about. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. That's a great kind of reality check. It's like, okay, that's what's possible. This air-conditioned apartment that's a little bit dim is not so bad.
Yeah. Like, I can make it work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's a really good frame that I'm going to be able to have.
Uh-huh.
And a really cool story to think about.
That's just the power of reading these stories and like historical novels, and you can become more grateful for what you have, and you can get more centered and more realistic about what you want or what's important.
And we talked about the last episode, like, each book you read is a soldier going to war for you.
Yeah.
No problem. And that feels like another soldier, even though it's not a book. That was awesome to go dig into that. I was reading some of their ship notes and their logs, and just looking at
Did they show any despair from what you read?
There was one time where Shackleton was not kept his composure. In like 800 days. There was one day where he let it out. And it was when they were on the rowboat trying to get from Elephant Island to the next island with the whaling station, and they'd just been kind of meandering through these huge storms, and there was a little bird that was just like flying above them, just kind of pestering him.
Yeah. And
that was just the last straw, and he lost it. He was swearing out at the bird and like flipping out for 15 minutes, and his men didn't really know what to do. And then at the end of that, he was like, okay, I let out some of that anger. But like, crazy, that was the only time. And he wrote down in his journal that would never happen again.
What do you think he saw in himself that he didn't like there?
Well, he was showing emotional distress, which he couldn't do.
Mm-hmm.
He needed to seem like he was confident and unbothered because he was the pillar,
Yeah.
At least that's what he wrote that he needed to do.
And
one of my favorite parts about this whole story is that he comes back. He gets another expedition funded and comes back to the Arctic after the war's over.
No way.
And 8 of the men on that original journey volunteer to come with him.
No way. No way.
Like, I can't. He fought in World War I after that too. Like, he went to war. So he gets back from the Arctic, barely alive, goes to war, and then gets another mission funded to come back.
Dude, a man of steel right there.
I know. It's just so crazy. Like, it just keeps going and going and going. And
that's almost half of his original crew volunteered to come back.
Yeah. So that was a really cool story. And I guess maybe it's more than half. Some of them died in fighting in World War I when they got back. So of the people who were available, 8 of them still volunteered.
That's even more powerful example or a ratio. Yeah.
So I guess some of the lessons of working with the team, leading, being the morale would be almost hiding the problems is what he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
Hiding that it was actually like concerning. Like he was very concerned, but he didn't let anyone know.
That's a really powerful example. And you could say, he's in denial, or you could say that you could say a lot of things. Like you could say he's realistically afraid of the situation they're in, but what you can do, control what you can control, and you can't control the rest. Control the controllables is, what people say sometimes. If you could survive 2 years in the Arctic, just
like through winters. People die in the Americas in the winters.
Yeah.
Such a cool story. Like some of the men wrote down in their journal, like there at one point when the ship was breaking from the pressure, it was like making noises, like groaning a little bit.
Yep.
And the men were like, is that bad? He would say it was whales and things like that. And the men would write down like, I'm not sure it's a whale. But like they're like, boss says it's a whale. So they just kept going on.
Wow.
Like his confidence in the fact that it was not a problem led them to feel like it wasn't, even though it was obviously a big deal.
Major deal, sheets of ice coming together on either side.
Yeah. And like they were able to still do productive tasks because they felt there was still hope,
Right. So the leader was giving them confidence and purity that they could continue with the duties of the day.
Yeah. So that was one lesson from the book that I very much enjoyed. Well, lots of lessons, but one story full of them. Another one in the book of Human Nature talks about like perceiving intentions and maybe even unconscious sentiments.
Okay.
And like how body language is a big one of those. And it tells a story of a psychiatrist who, when he was a boy, contracted polio and he was paralyzed completely to the point where he couldn't move his neck or his mouth or anything except his eyes. And so he would sit in his little rural farmhouse all day long and just observe his family. He had 7 sisters and he would just watch them. And he started to notice that frequently what they were saying was not what they would mean. But the other 6 sisters, the discourse was going on, like wouldn't quite pick up on it.
Uh-huh.
And he would become frustrated that they weren't seeing what he was seeing. And that eventually it would have to come out verbally, like exactly what the sister meant. But it became a game for him because he had literally nothing else to do. So he'd sit there for months and just observe their body language and try and see how fast he could figure out what they were really saying or how they really felt. And he got like really good at it because it was all he could do. And like one day he's sitting in the living room, they've positioned him out the window so he has something to look at.
Yeah.
And like he feels like a little twitch in his finger. And all of a sudden he lights up because he realizes that that's the first time he's felt movement. And so he focuses really, really, really hard on it. And like 30 seconds later, there's another twitch.
Oh, wow.
And over years, like those twitches became like 2 fingers and then a whole hand and then an arm. And like he could kind of move around very poorly. And after, 10 years, he could walk again. And, but now rehabilitated, he still had this perception for body language that nobody else had because they hadn't been stuck in a room for a year.
Right.
And so he went into psychiatry partly because he understood that he had a better perception of how people felt than most other humans.
Right. Okay.
And the book goes over multiple instances where he would be able to read someone incredibly well, incredibly fast based off of their body language. It's just cool because he could figure out their sentiment about the topic before they even knew it. And you can imagine many instances when that would be a useful tactic.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see if someone's earnest or conniving or hopeful or truthful.
Yeah. I like the idea of being intentional about reading body language versus like passive feeling that you pick up.
Right. Or only listening to the words.
Because it's not really something that, at least I don't think about very often. Like I'm not watching their hands when they're talking or like if their foot's tapping. But I started doing it after I read the book, and it's crazy how fast you pick up on things. Like
Yeah.
it's been so unreal. In the last like 2 weeks, I've just been like, every time I have a conversation with somebody, like as the topic comes up, I'm just like not staring at them, but like in my peripheral, I'm paying attention.
Yeah.
And I'm like, whoa, like there's a whole nother dialogue going on here that wasn't perceived before.
Yeah. And they might not even be conscious of it either, right? Is that part of it?
No, I doubt they are.
Yeah.
And then I can direct the conversation where they want it to go without them even knowing that's what's going on. Like I can tell, like I bring up a topic and I can tell that it's like maybe an uncomfortable topic, and so I can shift. Like, but their words would not have indicated that.
I can lead you to be a great conversationalist and relationship
It
builder.
has been. It's been so noticeable. It's yeah.
Amazing. I remember seeing a Conor McGregor interview where he was discussing when they were like squaring off with their weigh-in, and he was,
Yeah.
I don't remember the fighter. I'm not like paying attention to MMA very much, but he noticed that when the fighter had squared off, his right hand kind of twitched a little bit, and it
Yeah.
the story's like I could tell he was waiting to unload that right hand. So I decided to set the traps and wait for him to do that, and when he did, then I was going to do this and this, and that's exactly how the fight went down.
I have seen that clip. It's
Yeah,
so crazy. Like he predicts the knockout perfectly
yeah, move by move based on that little hand twitch.
based off the body language. Yeah. I couldn't believe how little I'd paid attention to it prior, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like you get like a sensation when you're having a conversation with somebody and their body language is involved.
Yeah,
But I never connected that with like actual cognitive thought, which is I guess the next progression.
that's really powerful. Lifetime practice, you can continue to improve, right?
Yeah. I mean, it just greatly improves likability, you know,
Yeah,
which is one of the major pillars of sales. If you are into that.
yeah, for sure.
Another lesson that I've been reading about is in Elon Musk's autobiography. Yeah, there's a lot of lessons from that one. But some of the ones that I thought were interesting is he'll throw out things that are like impossible or overdone, understanding that they are, but he still like violently requires that people like full force, full throttle towards those goals,
Okay,
even though they're not realistic.
like going to the
And the
South Pole,
result,
like transverse to
yeah,
the South Pole, Antarctica. Yeah,
yeah, similar.
yeah,
The result is that all these things pop up that people didn't think were possible. Like they still frequently come short of the goal,
yeah.
but they find like 4 or 5 things that they thought, wow, I would have never, that's an innovation that I wouldn't have stumbled across. And it happens over and over and over and over. Like one of the examples is he's got the Falcon 9 engine, which is his main, at least at the time of the book, is the main workhorse for launching satellites.
Uh-huh.
And he comes up to his Falcon 9 team who's like grinding, like staying up till 4 a.m. every night,
Yeah,
and like missing birthdays and like they haven't gone home in weeks.
yeah.
And he's like, this is going too slow. Like we're never gonna get to Mars in my lifetime at this speed. So he's like, we're scrapping that and we're building this new engine. And he's like, I want you to throw out the most radical ideas, the craziest things you can think of. He throws out some like metrics that are just totally unreasonable. He's like, we need a 10x power and half the weight.
Okay, yeah.
And they're like, what about the Falcon 9? Like that's how we're earning money, is making these. And he was like, doesn't matter, it's too slow. And so now now they're working more hours, which is like still inhuman.
Yeah.
And they're working on a rocket that doesn't exist yet and isn't like, but they have one that does. They're not working on it. And so for a month, they're just grinding and grinding and grinding and grinding. And they come up with some things like like the heat shield and the engine walls were the same bare thickness. And he's like, those are not exposed to the same amount of pressure. They should not be the same thickness. And so they like cut one of those in half.
Oh, okay. Uh-huh.
Or they decide that the funnel at the bottom is unnecessary in the vacuum of space.
Oh, okay. Uh-huh.
And a couple other things. But at the end of the month, he's like, okay, reroute. We're going back to the Falcon 9. They're like, what the heck? We just spent a month working on this so hard and now we're just going to scrap it. But they were able to take all those like little innovations and apply them to the new Falcon 9 to make it, well, the previous, and make it better.
Right.
And so throwing out that unrealistic, crazy new frame if we're making a new engine rather than improving the current one, they were able to innovate, whereas they probably wouldn't have. And none of the employees know if his goal had been to force innovation or if he was genuinely just trying to make a new engine. They don't know. But either way, they resulted in major improvements.
Yeah, it's quite the strategy is to just change the whole paradigm and not be stuck with those legacy thoughts from what they think the requirements are for the current project, right? Or the realities are for the current project.
Another one is he sets like stupidly unreasonable deadlines.
Yeah.
They'd been working on a dome for the rocket. I don't know if it was for the top of the rocket or if it was for like a launch edition, but they called it the dome they were working on. And it'd been like a month of iterations and tweaking it and like coming up with computer renderings and bringing in parts. And he's like, Elon Musk flips out just out of nowhere, and he's like, "Why don't we have a dome yet? It's been a month." And
Yeah.
the engineers start giving him all the reasons, and he's like, "Well, we don't have it because of this and this and this, and like we don't have this yet."
Yeah.
And he's like, "We're gonna have a dome by dawn." And he just starts saying that over and over. We're gonna have a dome by dawn. And so he flies in more engineers, and they're rushing to build up get food onto the island so that they can feed all the influx of new people.
Yeah.
And he's just the whole time he's just like chanting that we're gonna have a dome by dawn. They scrap part of these other rockets and like put it all together, and like they're like jerry rigging things. And by dawn they had their dome. Well, I guess 9 a.m. is when they had it.
No
But then none of
way.
them slept or anything. And that'd been a month of like tinkering around, and they finished it in 12 hours because he was just like flaming them.
I
So it's
love
really
it.
cool to see that he just forces it forward.
What do you think that's doing when he's repeating that mantra? What do you think it's doing to everyone's mindset or their expectations?
Well, I think a lot part of it is that prior to this, they're trying to perfect it and then bring a perfected dome to the table. But he's shifted the priority from perfect to urgent and now.
Yeah.
And speed. He shifted the priority to speed. And now that's helping them. Well, it's like drilling it into them that like speed is number one priority. And so it's okay to sacrifice some of these other things. But it ended up that they didn't need those.
So creating that constraint eliminated a lot of options.
That's a good way to say it also, yes.
That's really powerful.
Yeah.
I think that's my favorite example you've shared so far.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. Another one of his little mantras is like delete, delete, delete. He's like,
Mm-hmm.
if we're not bringing back 10% of the parts, we haven't deleted enough. Like his goal is just to cut out so many parts that they've cut out too many. And so he gets like, he'll go on these rages through the factories and stuff where he's like, why do we have this? And he's just
Yeah.
like asking all the departments, why do we have this? And the famous one is that there was a little mat in the car, and the sound department said it was for safety, and the safety department said it was for sound reduction. And like that's pretty famous. But he's done that with so many parts. And like the bottom of the car was made up of hundreds of little like bolt and screws and components.
Yeah.
And he's like his son is playing with a toy car, like a model little toy car.
Yeah.
And Elon Musk picks it up, and the whole bottom is just like one cast.
Yeah.
And he like shows his engineering room. He's like, why isn't ours like this? Why can't we do this? The toy car. He's like, why is ours not like this? He's like, there's only one part.
Yeah.
And they start saying why it's not like that. And then he flips out, and he's like, we're gonna do it like this. And it ends up being half, like an eighth of the price because it's just one part.
That's amazing. I love that.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
There's been a lot of cool little takeaways from that book also.
Mm-hmm. Wow, those are lessons that you're picking up that most people would never learn those. And it's even Musk has taken his life to learn these things, and even his top engineers
Yeah.
don't naturally think like that. That's really powerful to be picking up, putting these soldiers in your army.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
many soldiers. They're joining. We're recruiting.
Yeah, that's really cool. All really cool lessons. Walker, thanks for sharing those. Those are really, really, really good lessons from book reviews. I like that.
That's the best part of the book.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, thanks a lot. Everybody, if you like this, make sure you follow. Make sure you grab a free magazine. Make sure you get on the email list. We have a weekly newsletter, and we got a monthly magazine, and great people doing great things and sharing great lessons. So see you guys on the inside.